All right. Hello, wonderful peeps, and welcome to our latest dev interview as part of our mini indie showcase. I'm Harry Loizides, editor in chief for 61 Indie, and with me is Jamie Deegan from Mixtape Games. And today we're not talking about one game, but we're talking about two games. So thanks, Jamie, for coming over here.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited. What I love before we get started is what I love about your games is they are so freaking different from each other. So I can't wait to jump in and chat about that and how that kind of came into fruition. So before we get started about talking about those two awesome games, Jamie, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and anything you want to include with that?
Yeah, sure. I grew up in the east of London. I've been working in games for about 12, 13 years. I started out as a environment artist and then progressively became more generalist. Started freelancing for a few years and then decided to take the plunge and make my own game, which had always been a dream of mine. Started Hellscreen 7 years ago. Released that into early access earlier this year, and decided to also do a little smaller project called Vaporwave Pinball. So, um, so yeah, I've been around the block a little bit.
Nice, that's awesome. So let's start talking about Hellscreen.
Sure,
Tell us what the heck is a Hellscreen, and where did you get that idea from? Because I don't want to spoil what the idea is yet.
sure. So Hellscreen is a retro first-person shooter. It is something that came out of a joke years and years and years ago when I was at university when we would play Quake 3 at lunchtimes. And I would always lose. And I would always sort of insist that the reason why I lost is because other people would see me first and
Mhm.
before I'd see them and they'd shoot me, right? So and I kind of
Right.
joked about like the way you'd solve that problem is you had a rear view mirror. Um, and then I kind of forgot about it. But then as I started playing around with Unity years later on, and testing out various systems and things, I thought I'd put that in just to see if I could get that working. And then I did. And then suddenly I had all these ideas about different mechanics and things. And I kind of decided to run with it. And it kind of sort of designed itself, really.
So, what about the idea of the art style? So, I know you mentioned Quake. To me, it felt very old school Doomy. Like, how did you decide on that kind of art style? Was it just like we were saying with the ideas of you've played that kind of thing before and you wanted to kind of level the field with it?
Yeah, it was kind of this. It was like a quite a long journey, really, because I knew that I didn't want to do anything AAA just for time. Because originally it was going to be
Hmm.
a 6 month, very small project just to kind of ship something and put myself on the map a little bit. And as
Right.
I kind of decided, actually, I want to do something quite lo-fi and crunchy because I like that kind of pixel style anyway. And
Hmm.
originally it was going to be kind of almost like that game, which I can't remember the name of. Um, we were black, white, and red. It was, and it was very, very dynamic, but kind of doing things black, white, and red seemed very obvious. So I
Hmm.
decided just to kind of make the blacks more like blues,
Okay.
and it kind of went from that. And then once I kind of had a particular blue I liked, to kind of tweak some of the reds to be a little bit more pinkish in places.
Hmm.
And it just kind of came from that. And also there was just other considerations of the fact that I could be a bit sloppy with some of the texture art, which meant I could do it quicker because the art style
Right.
will kind of cover some of the seams a little bit. So it kind of come from that. But I mean, in terms of influences, yeah, it would have been like things like Doom, Alien Trilogy, Quake, Jedi Knight was a big one as well in terms of level
Hmm.
design. But it was all kind of designed to visually stand out, reference video games, and also be quick to do or quickish to do, I should say.
Oh, I love that. So you mentioned some games that were an inspiration or some pulling ideas. Were there any indie games that you might have like saw recently, and you're like, "Ooh, I really like this. I'm gonna kind of pull a little bit of this and kind of bring it to my game."
Um, not directly lifted, but there was definitely like when Devil Daggers came out, that kind of made me realise that I could do smaller games, which did kind of reference a more PS1 era, and that was
Hmm.
completely viable as a way to do things. Because Devil Daggers was so huge, but was quite a concise game, and that was good for me to know as someone who wanted to make a game but didn't want to spend ages making it. Of course, that's
Right.
exactly what happened. But off the top of my head, I can't really sort of remember many other games that were like many indie games at the time that really kind of inspired me. I mean, I certainly started keeping tabs on other retro first-person shooters as they came out. I mean,
Hmm.
Dusk, I think, had probably already been out, but I hadn't played it yet. But again, it was good to see that these games, made in their own style and their own way, which referenced the past, were completely successful. That was very encouraging to me.
Awesome. Now, something I saw on your Steam page for Hellscreen was a lot of people wrote the comment that it's almost like a Metroidvania. Do
Yeah,
you agree? Like, is that something that you aggressively are pushing, or because to me it was very RPS,
yeah,
FPS? Sorry.
yeah. It's I like to think of it as a Metroidvania light, um, in the sense of like,
Hmm.
I do put reasons to kind of go back to older levels, but they're more like bonus things. And actually, the way I designed the progression within a level was, you need this weapon to get past this level. So it was almost like a series of Metroidvanias in each level, because there's not like I say, there's not much
Oh,
backtracking,
nice.
but it was just a really, to me, it was
Hmm.
an interesting way of making sure that all the levels I made got a lot of usage, because I didn't want to have, as a solo developer, I didn't want to spend ages making 9, 10, or 11 individual levels like you would get in, say, Quake or Dusk or whatever, use them once and then never come back to them again, because it just wasn't
Right.
a sensible use of my time, you know. Um, so I
Hmm.
thought, well, if I had this Metroidvania thing, I can sort of have players go back, get new abilities, and sort of unlock, new areas and things, and that kind of
Hmm.
ended up lending itself well to the map system which I put in, which is where you can go to any map at any time once you've unlocked it. And then once I made the connection between that and Mario 64, which is another game I loved growing up, it kind of
Great game.
fell into place and then became its own thing. And that's kind of what I was trying to do. I really wanted it to kind of not take any design decision for granted that had been established in older games. I wanted it to be its own thing.
Okay. Um, I guess for me, I just have a question about how do you balance an FPS to make sure it's still tricky but not a complete wash for people who are trying to like just push through the game?
That's a really good question, and I'm not sure I've got an answer. I think generally it's great to put your game in front of new people all the time, um,
Mhm.
and make sure that there's always fresh eyes on it. I kind of went the way where, if it was easy for me, it was probably too hard for other people.
Yep.
So I would always just dial it back by like 20%. But whatever I felt was good enough, I would dial it back by 20%. And also,
Mhm.
because I didn't want Hellscreen to be constant action, which does sound kind of silly saying that about a retro first person shooter, but pacing and like moments of silence were important to me as well. So actually, um, it meant that I didn't flood the levels of enemies anyway.
Right.
And also, I never really cared about death in games anyway. So when you die in Hellscreen, you just start back at the level. Everything's still unlocked, so it's just kind of a case of doing these loops to get through the levels. Because I hate playing through a game where I die and I've got to start again because I just don't have a lot
Yeah.
of time to play games.
No, I really liked what you said about the pacing and not having constant fighting, because that seems to me like you're trying to bring the old school stuff to modern days, which sounds freaking awesome. So I'm really excited about everything with that.
Well, you know what?
Um,
It's because my favorite moments, some of my favorite moments in Doom. Bearing in mind, I used to play the PS1 version, which was a little bit more horror skewing anyway. Was
mhm.
getting lost and not knowing where
Right.
to go, and having just the ambient music playing and all that. And I wanted some of that in Hellscreen, where you're in these kind of areas and there's not really a lot of life, and you're just like, where do I go now?
Mhm.
Not in a sense where you're lost all the time, but just a few sort of moments of backtracking and looking around and stuff.
Awesome. Now, I also saw that Hellscreen is in early access, and there's several episodes. One's already out, a couple more are on the way. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, so it's going to be 2 additional episodes. There's going to be a couple of new weapons. There's going to be a couple of new enemies. I haven't figured out a lot of it yet because I'm still kind of trying to work out how I take how do I make an episodic Metroidvania, which is
Hmm.
surprisingly tricky. But there's going to be some cool stuff in there. Definitely some like weirder mechanics, because one thing that I sort of play with towards the end of Hellscreen episode 1 is like things like propellers and sort of mechanics which are only in certain levels. I want to
Hmm.
play around a lot more with that because that was a lot of fun. So there's going to be some cool stuff. There's going to be some weird looking stuff. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. For me,
Hmm.
I think episode 2 is when the real game starts. Episode 1 is almost like, to me, a long tutorial, kind of getting you ready to, you know, uh, teaching you how to use the mirror, hoping you're sort of getting
Hmm.
good at using the mirror and the backwards firing. Episode 2 is going to be, right, the training wheels are off. The
Right.
game gets really good now, you know.
No, I love that. I'm so excited. So, where can people find the game if they are interested in checking out early access?
So Hellscreen's available on Steam. Once it comes
Mhm.
out of early access, I'll be looking at other stores. But Steam's the place to go for now.
Nice. Cool. So that was Hellscreen. Super excited. Can't wait for more backwards shooting with the mirror. So that should be great stuff. Let's start transitioning a little bit to your other game that is scheduled to come out soon, Vaporwave Pinball. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this game?
Well, Vaporwave Pinball is exactly what it sounds like on the tin, I think. But it's the idea of playing lo-fi digital pinball in weird liminal spaces. Is
Mhm.
generally the kind of little tag for it. I like to think of it as a digital holiday.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love the visual aesthetics. Reminds me of Paradise Arcade, which is a recent game that came out in
Oh yeah.
terms of its color scheme, as well as something that you wrote on the Steam page. You wrote uncover corrupted files that are perhaps best not opened. What do you mean by that? Is that like where there's ominous shenanigans happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think with a lot of I think vaporwave is generally quite a safe abstract space, but it does kind
Mm-hmm.
of blend into things like the back rooms,
Mm.
like sort of the breaking of reality, and I want to touch on that a little bit. It won't be super horror, but
Okay.
there's going to be just enough to kind of get you thinking about it.
No, I love that. I especially love that kind of like tease because this is also a game that looks like it's from a '90s operating system.
Right?
So
Yeah.
I'm excited to see how the balance between playing pinballs and dealing with the operating system kind of comes into play with that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, certainly.
So
Oh, sorry.
no, no, go ahead.
I was going to say certainly, like, because originally it wasn't going to have the operating system. It was going to be more like a PS1 demo disc. But
Hmm.
when I just love the idea of having this alternative reality operating system that was run by like VHS or VCR, and kind of making that look like it was a vaporwave color scheme, and the sound design in that was particularly fun.
Have you created all the sound designs, or how did you pull on those?
So I did all the music, I did all the sounds, and I made them using my Nintendo Switch.
Oh
Um,
man.
and I've got this really weird process where I've got to connect my Switch to an old
Mhm.
laptop using a headphone jack, and then that old laptop I upload to Google Drive, and then I go to my new laptop and download it to. It's a crazy process, but it's a very powerful tool, the app I'm using, and it means that I can get some quite authentic sounds, which
Mhm.
is great.
No, that's awesome. I really hope you share a picture of that once the game releases of like your cacophony of wires trying to go from one thing to another. I'm sure
Yeah,
it's
yeah, I will for sure. That's a great
modern
idea.
days, modern day awesomeness. Um, in terms of the vaporwave and the color scheme, how did you go from Hellscreen to Vaporwave Pinball? Was that a conscious decision? Or were you just in the mood of changing gears? Because they are aesthetically really different in terms of vibe and color scheme in a
Well,
good way.
yeah, yeah, sure. I mean, I always knew that like I was going to be, whenever I made a new game, it was going to be super different from the last one, which is why I call my company Mixtape Games, right? Because I knew it was going to be
Mhm.
a mixture of things. In terms of going from Hellscreen to Vaporwave Pinball, like I'd been listening to a lot of vaporwave anyway, and I'd been wanting to make some
Mhm.
vaporwave music for a long time. But also, like in Hellscreen, I'm only ever dealing with maybe 12 colors at a time. With
Mhm.
vaporwave, I can play more with lighting and color composition and framing and stuff. So it really was me just kind of wanting to dip my toe into making environment art again,
Mhm.
in a kind of sense of like, some of those environments they took me a couple of days. They didn't really take that long, and just
Right.
kind of exploring that again, because the thing that I miss most from after working so long on Hellscreen is lighting. Like a lot of the lighting in Hellscreen is kind of real time, and it might as well be black and white. Whereas with
Right.
Vaporwave Pinball, I can have different colors and different fall offs and fog and atmosphere and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of funny that Vaporwave Pinball got made at all, because I've been wanting to make a pinball game for a long time. It just so happened that I got into the Vaporwave thing, and it just kind of grew in
Mhm.
my mind a little bit.
So why pinball? Is it just like a childhood desire, or is it the physics that you find really interesting in games?
I think because I think it's the physics. I'm fascinated by the idea of expanding on pinball in video game form. A lot of that comes from like Sonic Spinball,
Okay.
right? You can control the ball, brilliant.
Mhm.
And like, there's definitely been a
Yeah.
few
Right.
games
Great callback.
which, right, like there's definitely been a few games where they give the player more control. But it'd been on my mind for a while to do
Mhm.
a pinball platformer, but I didn't want to go that far in terms of scope, so I pared it back down and made it just about playing pinball with spaces. Because at one point in Vaporwave Pinball, you were going to walk around these spaces. It was going to be, you'd walk around, go up to a wall, there'd be a digital pinball, you play, and then you go somewhere else. But again, the scope of that was too much. I wanted to pare it right down, because
Okay.
this was meant to be like a 2 week project away from Hellscreen. I've spent maybe an extra week on it, but
Oh wow.
it's what my friend calls a game jam plus. It's something you work on it very small, like a small thing for a few days, and
Oh
then you
nice.
expand upon it. But there's definitely an end date in sight, right? Of like,
Mhm.
right, that's when I'm going to finish working on it. But it just turned out that people like sort of like the vibe and wanted to know more about it. So that's kind of why I guess we're talking about it now, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Um, so when you were saying, I think it was pinball platformer, have
Yeah.
you heard of Yoku's Island Express?
That's the one. You know what? I couldn't remember the name
Okay,
of
yeah,
it, but
because
it was
that
in my
that
head.
really
That looks very
there
cool, and
you
it was something like that, But even the idea of like a Metroid pinball, I'm like, that's a great idea, going between tables and things.
yeah.
But
Mhm.
and that was another thing I wanted to explore in Vaporwave Pinball, is like, what different shapes of tables can I have? Like
Right.
there's some code in the game where there's like portals, like from Portal, and you sort of flip
Mhm.
between them, and just stuff like that. Stuff you can't do. What can I do in a video game that I can't do on a real life pinball table? Is kind of some of the stuff I want to
Right.
play with in Vaporwave Pinball.
Yeah, no, it all looks very exciting. When I rewatched the trailer again, it was like you saw it on the wall, you saw it on the floor, in the pool, I think. So it really gave me almost like the Witness vibes in terms of like puzzles are everywhere, so pinball machines are everywhere in the
You know
universe.
what? You're not the first to
So
say
that
that,
really,
actually, and that is a very good reference, because I've not played The Witness, but obviously I've seen a lot of trailers and things. And when I was
Mhm.
describing the game to a friend, he said exactly that. I'm like, oh yes, I guess that's kind of the vibe I'm going for, which is I'm cool with that. That's a great
Yeah,
comparison.
yeah. So all those games we talked about, really good starting points. So if you can build on them, banger of a games. Not only one but two games. So Hellscreen and Vaporwave. So where can people get more info for Vaporwave Pinball?
So Vaporwave Pinball, that is also on Steam, ready to be wishlisted, and the demo is still up, and also it's on itch as well,
Yes.
itch.io.
And is there a release date for that one?
Not yet. Not quite ready to announce a release date yet, but there should be some news soon.
Oh, very exciting. So if people wanted to follow your exciting news and updates, where can people find you?
People can find me on Twitter with the handle UK at UK_resistant, and they can find me on Blue Skies with the same handle. UK.
Nice.
UK
Now,
underscore
before
resistance,
we
yeah.
Oh, perfect. Now, before we close up, is there anything that you want to bring up that we might not have chatted about yet, either for Hellscreen or for Vaporwave Pinball?
I can't think of
I
anything.
know
I feel like I should
that's
have had
always the
something
tougher. Like,
prepared.
what did we not talk about? Well, I just want to make sure that we give you the best opportunity to show off and gush about anything exciting in either of these games.
No, I really appreciate that. It's good to be seen. You know, it's hard. There's not a lot of people that are covering indie games on the kind of level that I'm on. A lot of it tends to be published stuff. So it's always great when you meet folks that are doing hard work to kind of put a spotlight on us people at the bottom of it
Yeah,
all, you
we
know?
love doing it. So, yeah. Especially because there's so many games coming out. It's kind of hard to get a handle of everything. So if we can kind of
And not only
help
that,
out
like,
the ones that are
exactly. And like, there are so many games which come out which do
Mhm.
crazy well and no one talks about them. Like, no one knows they exist. It's like it's like a little underworld of the games industry. That's how I kind of think of it. It's like there's, yeah, you know, you hear about sort of things from like Devolver and Curve and Team 17, and they're doing great work, but there's so many
Mhm.
things underneath that. Like, think about, like, I know like it's a popular thing to bring up, but think about Vampire Survivors. That came out of nowhere, right? That was
Right.
part of that kind of ecosystem at one point. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's good when folks put a torch on it all.
Spotlight, maybe.
Torch, spotlight, yeah, some
Yeah,
sort of
I
angled
like
light.
Torch better. It's more medieval.
But then
Very
that being
exciting.
said, torch sounds like, you know, fire. Like, we're gonna burn all the indie games. Don't do that.
No, we want to. No, and thank you for agreeing to interview with us. All right, so thank you everyone for watching this video. If you want to see any more of the 6-1 Indie Showcase cacophony of stuff, be sure to check out 61indie.com/showcase for other dev interviews, editorials, and more. And of course, play more indies. Bye, everybody.